confusing math. Now let's welcome to the program Mr. Dwayne Sand. Dwayne, welcome to the program. Happy to have you on.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I'm going to read from your press release here. This is quoting you directly. It says, quote, Congressman Berg is spending taxpayer funds on slick campaign-style mailers in an effort to promote his Senate campaign. Berg told North Dakotans he was going to D.C. to cut spending. Instead, he's using his time in D.C. to run for office on the taxpayer's dime. Go further. I call on Congressman Berg to disclose how much he has spent on these mailers immediately. He knows how much he has spent. There's no reason we should have to wait. He should tell us how much taxpayer money he's spending on a Senate campaign. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with you in that we should know how much Congressman Berg spent on these mailings as part of transparency. I have a feeling, though, when it comes out, we're going to find that it's probably a figure maybe in the tens of thousands of dollars, and it's going to be very, very trivial in terms of the overall national debt. And I really got to wonder as an observer why we're spending our time talking about this instead of Obamacare and Solyndra and the economy and all these other issues.
Is that a question?
That is a question, yeah.
Okay.
I'm wondering, why are we spending our time on this?
Well, Rob, I agree with you. We ought to be talking about much more important, bigger things. And it's just ridiculous that we can't just get this information and move on. I mean, quite frankly, though, you have to put this issue into perspective. And and let me tell you, I listened to your show on Friday, and I disagree with your assessment that this isn't a big deal from that. And that Republicans don't care, because it's Republicans who started calling me about all these mailings. And so here's the perspective, Rob. And I don't begrudge anyone, by the way. You know me from making a good living or succeeding and living the American dream, making millions of dollars. But basically, you have one of the wealthiest members of Congress who less than 100 days into his term decides to run for the Senate, which is a job promotion, and who has $1 million or more in his campaign account using our money, the taxpayers' money, to send out mailings that are clearly political in nature. Now, I don't begrudge any congressman or senator either from using their franking privileges to communicate with their constituents. But I've never, and I've been doing this a long time, seen anyone, Democrat or Republican, spend so much time or so much money on so many different mailings in such a small time frame, when he's not actually using them for constituent communication, more or less for campaigning. So I just think, tell the people what they want to know. Republicans are not happy about this. Conservative Republicans are not happy about this. Let's get it beyond us and just let people know how much this cost. And I don't know why that's such a big secret.
Well, I agree with you, and I've asked the Berg's congressional office directly for Q3 numbers, and they've been kind of putting me off. So that's a little frustrating, and I don't understand why they can't just divulge the numbers. I mean, the numbers are what they are. Let's put them out there, and let's talk about them. Whether you think it's appropriate or not. The only issue I have is that everybody does this. And there's 4 or 5 mailings from Rick Berg now, but from the people I've spoken to, it's not like people have gotten 5 consecutive mailings from Rick Berg. Not everybody's getting all of these mailings. Some of them are getting one mailing, some of them are getting another mailing. So it's not like there's been 5 consecutive mailings, just to be clear on that. And the other thing that I worry about is that everybody does this. Ken Conrad did this. And granted, it was just one mailing, but I remember he sent out a thing about Obamacare, and it was, Obamacare is not a government takeover of health care and all these things. And I disagree. I mean, it was a blatantly political mailing. But, I mean, at this point, is it really fair to pick and choose? I mean, are we going to start nitpicking what sort of franked mail they're sending? I mean, it seems trivial.
Well, again, it's not the most important issue. I totally agree with you on it. But, it's 5 different mailings. I've sent mailings out like this. Just the setup cost per piece is expensive. And Democrats do it, and it's wrong. It's wrong when anyone does it like this. But this is more extreme than any Democrat I've even seen do it in the state. Not to say they haven't done it, but to this extent, that I don't think they've done it. And I think the whole reason, Rob, and you're in on the founding of this whole Tea Party uprising in the state. It doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat. It's wrong both ways. And a guy who says he's going to Washington to balance the budget, sends out this many mailings to so many different people on federal money that we don't have, that we have to charge just to send. it's not ironic. It's a double speak. It's outside both sides of the mouth. So let's just get it beyond us. Give us the information. Tell the taxpayers how much money we charge to our Chinese credit card to send these out, and let's be done with it.
Yeah, on that much we agree. Let's find out the number. The way the media has reported it, and granted, the media is not in North Dakota is not always the most trustworthy source for this sort of information, but the way they characterized this was that Heidi Heitkamp decided to make an issue out of it, and then she called you in on it to issue a joint press release on it, and from a lot of what a lot of Republicans have told me was that they're wondering why you're helping Heidi Heitkamp essentially create a distraction. Because one thing Heidi does not want to talk about is Obamacare when she was leading, SEIU rallies in favor of Obamacare. And she doesn't want to talk about the national debt. And she's got the president at the top of the ticket on her side that she's going to have to contend with. And so, of course, Heidi Heitkamp wants to talk about mailings because she can't talk about anybody else. And what I've heard from Republicans is, why is Dwayne Sand helping Heidi Heitkamp mount a distraction?
I'm sure that the a few in the Republican establishment are asking that question and hoping that it gets asked a lot more. And it's a fair question. I don't even mind them asking it. But here's the thing: we're going to do something like this on our own anyway. And the only thing that we agreed on between the two campaigns, that if we both sent out something independently, it wouldn't get any press. And I've been, like I said, in this game a long time, and know that, and you probably know, Rob, that's true. I mean, if we independently sent out our own press releases on this issue, no one would care. No one would care. And it's an important enough issue where if she's heard from that many Democrats and I've heard from that many Republicans, that we should get the question answered. And we thought it'd be the best way to get it answered. It's probably the only thing. I think, in fact, there's one other thing I may agree on with Heidi Heitkamp and the whole universe, and that is repealing the pharmacy bill, the pharmacy law that's currently in the initiated measure, which you're a part of. But today in Congress, there's a joint press release by the Republicans, Democrats on the joint committee announcing their failure, of course. But it's not completely uncommon. We just don't do a lot in North Dakota, so I don't think it's that odd at all.
All right. Well, Dwayne, I tell you what, can I hold you through the break and we can get into some other aspects of your campaign?
Sure, please.
All right. Dwayne Sand, candidate for the U.S. Senate for the NDGOP. We're going to talk with him more after the break. I'm Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennon, 855-200-1776. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennon. And on the phone with us, talking about the 2012 campaign, is candidate Dwayne Sand. Just talked about the much-discussed mailers issue, which, judging from the noise in the letters of the editor is like the biggest issue in the world. I think Berg needs to come clean, and I think, the longer Berg holds out on that that dollar figure that he spent on this, the longer this is going to hang out there. So, honestly, I'm not sure how important an issue it is, but really, Berg needs to bring it closure by disclosing some numbers, and Dwayne, I think that's something that you and I can agree on and find some common ground. Let me ask you about the rest of your campaign. How's it going so far?
Well, Rob, these are marathons, and they are not sprints. We know what money we need and what message we need and what coalitions we need to have by convention time, and we are on track to have all that. We have invested a lot of money in finding new donors to my campaign. They've been very generous. I'm both pleased with in and out of state contributions to this campaign. Unfortunately, money matters a great deal in politics when you want to compete, especially with someone like Rick, who has plenty of unlimited money, basically. And so we've got the right message. We've got an independent, conservative, Republican voice. We've got those issues on our side. It's Rick, I think, has the uphill slog, so to speak, Rob, because he's got to go into the convention hall and explain to conservative Republican delegates why voting with Nancy Pelosi 42% of the time is the right thing, why voting to increase the debt limit and add $10 trillion to our national debt is the right thing, why he voted not to cut the budget of the EPA or couldn't even vote to cut the budget of not just the EPA but of Amtrak, why he voted for this unlimited balanced budget amendment that 47 Republican senators said they would vote against if it made it to the Senate. So I mean, you know, he has more money. We have better message. And let's just hope over time we get that message out to people. And if we do, we'll win the convention. If we don't, we'll reassess and think about whether or not we're going to move to the primary.
Here's the calculus, and I'm just playing. It's not my calculus, but this is the calculus that a lot of my Republican friends tell me that they're doing. They're looking at it as who can beat Heidi Heitkamp, because they think that the Democrats are going to put a lot of money into the North Dakota Senate race. I'm not sure how true that is, frankly. They've got 23 Senate seats to defend nationally, plus
right.
Obama's campaign. They're going to be stretched pretty thin. But that's the thing they're saying, is that Democrats could potentially put a lot of money into Heidi Heitkamp's race here in the state. She's going to be a tough candidate to beat. And whatever else Rick Berg may be, he's not as far left as Heidi Heitkamp, so we want to make sure we beat Heidi Heitkamp. Rick Berg, who knocked off Earl Pomeroy, deserves credit for that, is the best chance at doing that. What's your response to that calculus?
Well, you know, I'm good friends with some people deep inside Berg's campaign, and that's the message that they want to tell people at every level that they can, and that is that we got to elect someone who can beat Heidi Heitkamp, because they want basically people to assume I can't, which is completely wrong. But, you know, that's their campaign tactic. That's fine. I mean, that's their message. Their message is not elect someone who's going to vote to balance budget or cut spending or vote to cut the budget of the EPA or Amtrak or anything else. Their message is just vote for me because I can beat Heidi Heitkamp. Well, that I don't think sells when it comes to convention time. I really don't, and so that's what I think about it. I think it's a losing strategy.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. We hear this laundry list of things that Rick Berg's done wrong. Is there anywhere where you think Berg's done a good job as a congressman? Just playing devil's advocate here.
Well, do I think he's better than Pomeroy? Absolutely. I mean, I marched in a parade, the longest, hottest parade in the state last summer in 2010 with Rick. I think he's 10 times better than Pomeroy. But when he called me in May after I'd already been in the Senate race and told me the reasons he was running, and then I looked at his votes, and he's got a 58% rating with the Heritage Foundation, for crying out loud. He's not doing what he said he was going to do, and I didn't quite frankly think he would anyway. I mean, he's never been a conservative. He's been a moderate. And so, you know, when he asked me to get out just because of that, I'm not going to. I chose not to because I want to stand on the principles that we talked about, have been talking about, that you and other conservatives in the state have been talking about for 6 years, and that is to actually cut spending. Not go along and just pull the Republican lever, because the Republicans, believe it or not, aren't always even right. They're more right than the Democrats, but we've seen Republicans add to the debt and to the deficit when they controlled the House, Senate, and White House back in when Bush was in. So we need an independent voice, a conservative voice, and you know, if there's not enough people to believe in that, then I'll lose. If there is, I'll win, and the party and the message and hopefully the state will be stronger for it.
Presuming that you would get the nomination, stipulating that you would get the nomination, how does Dwayne Sand campaign against Heidi Heitkamp? How do you beat Heidi Heitkamp?
Well, you know, we're a product of our environment. We're a product of our history. I'm a 25-year-long career military guy, small business owner, grew up on a farm in eastern North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota. Heidi Heitkamp grew up on a farm in eastern North Dakota, but she's a lifelong EPA lawyer, a tax commissioner, an attorney general. She's a lawyer. I think the last thing we need in Washington right now are more lawyers. So I think I bring a much better perspective on how to solve economic problems. I've built small businesses and paid thousands of employees thousands of paychecks, or hundreds of employees thousands of paychecks, and I have been to 41 countries. I know the world. I've been around the world. I've fought in wars for our country around the world. I bring an entirely different perspective, and I'm certainly not a supporter of Obamacare, and that's one thing that I feel Heidi is really going to, like you said, Rob, I agree with you 100%. She doesn't want to talk about Obamacare because she's all over supporting it. And it is one thing we know for sure, not only our country but our state rejects, and they're going to reject it next November. Whoever the Republican nominee is will be the next senator of our state.
If you don't win the nomination at the convention, are you going to push it to a primary vote on the ballot?
The only thing I've said is I'm not going to rule that out, and I told that to Rick in May when he called me. I'm not going to rule it out because the conventions are a lot of times party insiders. They're all the legislators. We know the legislators, 90% of them are supporting Rick already. Plus, they bring their wives and their kids. If it doesn't seem that if I lose because it seems that 30% or more of the delegates are already stacked against me just because it's the Republican establishment's vote, then we'll have to think about it. But it also depends on how well I do at the convention if I were to lose. But we're not planning that right now. We're planning winning, and then I'll let you know the day after.
Okay, sounds good. And last question. Some say you've been on the ballot 3 times statewide in North Dakota, lost 3 times. If we put you up a 4th time, there's that risk that 3-time loser. Can you win a 4th time? What's your response to that?
My reaction is laughter because
I want to give you fair time to answer that. Can you hold through one more break?
Yeah,
we'll get to you after that. I want to make sure you have plenty of time to answer that because, as the music says, we got to go to a break. I'm Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennon. More to come straight ahead after this. 855-200-1776. If you want to join the program, we'll be right back. Don't go away. Rob Port sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennon, who's out today. He'll be back tomorrow. Jack Abramoff is going to be our guest tomorrow. Who better to talk about corruption in Washington, D.C. than Jack Abramoff? Anyway, that's coming up tomorrow. Our guest is Dwayne Sand, who I've held through 2 guests and two breaks. I don't want to take up any more of his time, but I did want to give you plenty of time to answer the question about electability. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the interview. A lot of people very, very concerned with beating Heidi Heitkamp for a lot of excellent reasons. And, the question for you is that you've lost 3 times. What can make 4th time a charm?
Well, I apologize for laughing earlier, Rob, but it is almost comical. I mean, let's start with just the basic facts about beating incumbents in Washington, D.C. They have a 96 or 97% reelection rate, Republicans or Democrats. It doesn't matter what state they're from, North Dakota, Florida, Texas. They have a 96, 97% reelection rate because they have unlimited monies to tell independents and their base who they are, who they want them to think they are. So I got into the races in the past because it's the right thing to do. I ran in 2008 when no one else wanted to, in 2004 when no one else wanted to, because everyone knew the odds of running against a well-funded, popular incumbent. I did it because it was the right thing to do because the party asked me to do it in 2008. And, I lost. I fully acknowledge that. But that's not lost on the effort. The ideas of capitalism, free markets, independent thinking and rights and not an unintrusive federal state government in our lives are important concepts that need to be talked about in any election, whether the odds are stacked against you or not. So if any of that is of no value to some people, there's the advantages of having run before, I guess, are that you are well known, and I think that I have a good rapport with people. I think I've got great ideas for growing the economy, putting America back to work. Abraham Lincoln, people tell me, lost a few times before he got elected. If North Dakotans know anything about me, Rob, is that I'm tenacious, that I do not quit. When I think something's the right thing to do, and I can do it, I will do it. And to quote, I think it's Teddy Roosevelt, if you have the ability to make a difference in your country, then you have an obligation. And if I have that quote wrong, I apologize. I'm paraphrasing, but I did it because it was the right thing to do. And I think that a military veteran, small business owner, husband, father, in any state has a good chance. And so I reject those claims that I can't win because I've lost before. It just doesn't make any sense.
All right, fair enough. Dwayne, thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Have a great Navy Day, Rob.
All right. Great Navy Day. That's a Navy man for you. Anyway, that's the man saying why he can win. And, I know there's a lot of concern out there. I will say this. Let me wrap up this. I love the fact that we have 2 Republican candidates for the Senate and as many as 5, depending. We've got 3 definite candidates for the U.S. House on the Republican side. And Kim Koppelman's got an exploratory committee, and Shane Gettle's got a campaign website. It looks like he's going to get in as well. 5 candidates. for the U.S. House. I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think it speaks to how confident Republicans are. But now the thing is that we're going to have to pick the right Republicans. I think something Dwayne said is that really these elections, I think in a lot of ways, are going to be decided at the convention. I think Heidi Heitkamp's likely to have a lot of money, but, I mean, let's face it. Her campaign is not impressing a lot of people. The Washington Post had ranked North Dakota's Senate race as the one most likely to change hands in this election cycle after Heidi Heitkamp got into the race. They kept it that way. The rating from Roll Call is likely Republican. And even today, the National Journal has North Dakota number 1. He saying, I quote, Republican Rick Berg is the odds-on favorite to take over retiring Senator Conrad's seat. Now, Dwayne Sand might have something to say about that, but I think it speaks volumes about Heidi Heitkamp's campaign. So, for what it's worth. By the way, you can read that about the National Journal at sayanythingblog.com. I want to move on to this. Obviously, the Occupy Wall Street people, protest, movement, whatever you want to call it, has garnered a lot of attention nationally. And one of their tactics, and I think it's worthwhile to mention this, because over the weekend we had a story out of UC Davis where a police officer, and there's video of it, there's a bunch of protesters, they're locked arm in arm, they're kneeling on the ground, and a police officer, there's a big crowd of students yelling and screaming around him. A police officer walks to the middle, brandishes his pepper spray canister, almost sort of taunting the crowd with it, and proceeds to hose down the protesters who are kneeling on the sidewalk with the pepper spray. Completely unnecessary. I don't think there's any excuse for it. I think it's wrong. I think it's abuse of police power. These people were not fighting. They were passively sitting, kneeling on the ground. Agree with their protest or not, I don't think they deserve to be pepper sprayed in that instance. If you haven't seen the video, it's at sayanythingblog.com. It's been all over the place, though. I'm sure you've probably seen it at this point. But what's frustrating for me about this, and again, I'm not making excuses for the police, but what's frustrating to me about it is that this altercation, it's that this sort of police misbehavior, let me put it that way, this sort of police misbehavior is exactly what the Occupy protesters have been trying to achieve all along. All of the attacks on police, the screaming and threats and thrown objects were intended to bait the cops into some sort of misbehavior that could be caught on video and used for propaganda. There was an MSNBC analyst, Donnie Deutsch, as a matter of fact, who said on MSNBC that the Occupy Wall Street movement needed their Kent State moment. They needed their Kent State moment. They needed that moment in time that they could point to and say, look at the way, the man is oppressing us or putting us down or whatever. They needed their Kent State moment, and I think a lot of people are looking to what happened in UC Davis as that moment, or at least the modern watered-down moment, or a watered-down equivalent. After weeks of murders and rapes and generally filthy behavior by the occupiers, they finally pushed a couple of cops, and it's the UC Davis or the local police. These cops, 2 people have been suspended as a result of this incident at UC Davis. But they finally pushed a couple of cops to the point of lashing out. Why they think this furthers their cause is beyond me. I don't think that this makes their movement any less filthy. I don't think it makes their movement any less violent. I don't think it makes their ideology, insofar as you can even discern an ideology in this confusing mass of anger, any more childish or wrong-headed. They, behaving like so many spoiled children, finally managed to provoke the sort of snap they were looking for all along. It happened. The cops should be investigated and dealt with appropriately. But the Occupy Wall Street movement remains very, very stupid. I don't think there's another word for it. It's idiotic, what they're calling for. They want, it doesn't make any sense. And one cop who snapped in the face of so much childish behavior doesn't lend any sense of credibility to the movement. Anyway, more to come straight ahead. More open phones, 855-200-1776. I'm Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman. We'll be back right after this. Don't go away.